Introducing Malik King Scott. Introducing Luis King Kong Ortiz.
In the dressing room, I want a clean fight, okay? Chicken, good luck.
Then Canelo had to establish himself as the baddest by totally demolishing anyone they put in front of him.
Round one begins, and Ortiz begins to size up Scott behind his right-hand scope.
Scott being very smart, using those legs for defense right away. Smartest thing that he can do until he figures out what he's up against. And you got to give guys like Scott credit. Not many people, as Max would mention earlier, I'm sure, want to be in the ring with a guy like Luis Ortiz. So,
or are you going to at some point stand your ground and fight like a heavyweight? There's the discussion again. You know, as Ortiz once again pulls his hands apart.
Ortiz is going to deal with this a lot. Other heavyweights are not going to want to engage. Goading the other guy is not going to work. You know, and here you see him sliding over, trying to make the ring smaller and smaller for Malik Scott. But still allowing a little too many escape lanes for Scott along the ropes.
Problem is, Max, that guys like Ortiz, sometimes they don't like to take the ring and down approach. And what ring and down would do now is stick punches.
We have CompuBox punch counters counting the punches for both fighters. Malik Scott finally throws a right hand. The first punch of the fight delivered by Scott.
Good, smart, survival type punch. One that makes Ortiz have to respect it and defend himself.
Should Ortiz be focusing on body punching early, Roy Jones, given the...
You can't go out there and expect that Scott is going to trade with you, but Scott knows that he's had problems with big punches in his temple.
He understands that if Ortiz lands a big left-hand flush, most everybody else has gone down. Why wouldn't he?
Worst case scenario here is that Scott does this for 7 or 8 rounds before Ortiz finally catches up with him.
But what he'll do, if he can survive 2 or 3 rounds or 2 rounds of this, he'll start to probably take a chance or two himself.
Ortiz was not able to find the target with a big shot in round number 1. No associations whatsoever. Found Caicedo, a Spanish-speaking trainer in a Miami gym. Likes the way he works and has been with him ever since.
But when the ref has to tell one of the guys to start fighting, generally he's not winning the round.
Well, this is also why the Cuban amateur team would not have liked Ortiz.
Lighter weight division. I mean, it's called heavyweight in the amateurs, but in reality, that size fighter in the pros is a cruiserweight. So we bring sort of cruiserweight skills in a heavyweight package now with super heavyweight power.
There were Cuban heavyweights prior to Ortiz who achieved huge reputations in the amateur world. Feliz Sabon was his successor as the outstanding heavyweight in amateur boxing, but both of them were a little bit different from Ortiz in the sense that they had
gold medalists, and that Ortiz was not as successful on the international level.
If he had been given the opportunity more frequently by the Cuban coaches.
As Roy points out, this is also not an amateur style. He has a professional hurt-you style.
And that's why the Cuban amateur coach, anytime you walk around like this and look for one big punch, that's not going to win you a lot of fights in waiting for every opportunity that they can to cut the guy off and throw 4 or 5 punches right there.
And we shouldn't just dismiss Ortiz's lack of success at the highest level of the amateurs in international competition. Unless it was someone like Manny Pacquiao, who turned pro before he would have been a top amateur, and the top of the pound-for-pound rankings in the pros were the most successful international amateurs.
Particularly in the heavyweight division. It seems to show up more there
Lennox
than
Lewis,
anywhere else.
Vladimir Klitschko going back to Muhammad Ali.
Joe Frazier.
Sure. You think Triple G was a tremendously dominant international amateur. Lomachenko, Brigandiao, you mentioned, Jim. These are the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. As pros, they were as amateurs, too.
He picks it up a little too high like that right there. See how big high he picks it up? And that makes it very easy for a guy to elude him coming and catching him in that corner. So he has to shorten that step up on that right foot coming forward, or else Malik is going to continuously...
And so he would like to move. Ideally, he'd move clockwise. And Ortiz is generally moving him counterclockwise. But at a certain point, as Roy says, when he's along the ropes, you need to corner him like there instead of letting him slide along the ropes. You got to step up and corner him.
And more get Scott into situations, traps as we call them, where he can't escape. And there's a left hand over the top, and Scott goes to the canvas once again, as Max Kellerman pointed out earlier, breath of air and see what it feels like.
You got to figure out when you're an aggressive power punching fighter, you have to figure out a way when you know other fighters, particularly at this level, will be fighting extremely defensively. You have to figure out a way to get your offense off.
And the way you do that is you got to fight the target before you get close enough to fight him. Meaning right now, if he starts punching while he's away from him, then by the time you get close enough to really hit him, Malik won't realize that he's made those advancements, and he'll be able to catch him. Like right now, you should be hitting the hands. You should be making Malik block.
Move those hands one way or another,
so that he can't rely on just his feet. You're never going to catch his feet. See, like right there, then you can catch the target. See, if you don't make him occupy those hands.
I get it. But when it comes to a guy like Luis Ortiz, the option at this stage in his career is either don't see him at all or see him in fights like this, because there's a certain level of fighter that's going to avoid him, and the fighters who do fight him are going to try to survive. And as a boxing fan, my choice would be it's better than nothing. At least I get to see the guy.
That's the fourth time that Malik Scott has been on his knees on the canvas. So Harold Letterman's unofficial scorecard, probably something of a foregone conclusion after 3 rounds. Harold, how do you have it?
Okay, Jim, I got it 3-0, 30-27, Luis Ortiz. You know, Jim, this referee drives me crazy. It's going to be very interesting. I think you're going to have to hit the guy over the head for him to call it a knockdown. Not only that, when Scott gets up, he doesn't even clean his gloves off. He just says box. But be as it may, Luis Ortiz doing all the punching.
There's a left hand to the head. And finally, apparently, Lene is going to call this a knockdown.
And Scott claiming a rabbit punch. Maybe if a guy's throwing a punch and you duck and it winds up hitting you in the back of the head, it's not an intentional rabbit punch.
This is bizarre.
If in fact it landed there, we'd have to see on replay.
But as far as we could tell from the body language of Lene, that was an official knockdown. Malik Scott was gone in 1.5 minutes against Deontay Wilder. Now here against another big heavyweight puncher, Ortiz. He's made it into the 4th round. Does that automatically tell us that Wilder is better than Ortiz?
Heck no, that doesn't almost tell us that Wilder is better than Ortiz. That tells us that Wilder has seen Malik Scott. Ortiz didn't know him like that, so Ortiz, it took him a little bit longer to figure it out. And if you notice, with Wilder, he came out and stood right there. With Ortiz, he came out moving, trying to survive for a couple of rounds before he allowed Ortiz to get to him.
He's been on the canvas twice in this round. The first one was apparently ruled an official knockdown. The second time, the referee sort of held his hands out as if to say, what are you doing? Why do you keep going to the canvas? But at the end of the day, Malik Scott seems to know he's going to be there eventually.
And the one word about Wilder, who's, you know, as I said, the first time he was in with a real guy, Stavern, he looked really good. I thought fought a disciplined fight, and he won going away. And meantime, here's Luis Ortiz coming off of just about a year layoff, not looking maybe as sharp as he might otherwise, especially against a guy who's running and just trying to survive.
Here you see Ortiz coming in on the attack, short left hand right there, and Malik went down from it. Then he comes again, Ortiz is once again on the attack. Kind of hits him down the middle with the left. That could have been called a knockdown because there was a punch that made contact and effect on him.
And the referee, Lene, decided that the second of those two was a push rather than a punch. Or at least it appeared that was the decision that he made. So now we go to the 5th round. And at this point, it's fair to say that Ortiz is chasing the knockout, barely bothering to defend himself or to worry about anything that Scott may throw back. Scott could actually hit Ortiz with a wild counter at some point, just because Ortiz is no longer paying any attention.
That at this stage in Ortiz's career, do you want this or do you want nothing? This is better than nothing, and there down goes Malik Scott.
That'll be the second knockdown, and again, Scott puts his glove behind his head as if to say, I was rabbit punched, but that didn't appear to be the case there.
5 boring rounds, followed by the kind of knockout where maybe Malik Scott's complaining falsely about a rabbit punch. Just makes the whole night stink.
Yeah, he's coming off an 11-month layoff. If you give them a guy who doesn't want to fight, then of course they're going to make it ugly because they're not going to take stupid gambles. They're not going to take excessive risk to try to get a guy out of there. So you have to give them a guy that's going to fight them, or it's not going to be a really fan favorite to watch.
Exactly right.
That attended the promoter change for him.
That's exactly what they're going to tell us. But Jim, to his credit, at 37 years old, that could be very true. Because the older you get, the more that hurts you to stay out of the ring. That was bad for him to be out 11 months.
Say what you will about Deontay Wilder's level of opposition for a lot of his fights. He was active, and when you're active, it means you're in the gym. It means you're going through the process of those last couple days of preparation to get extra sharp for the fight, fine-tuning the way you prepare yourself. And then, of course, the process of going through with the fight itself. So Deontay Wilder
in the fight so far, and there's another right hand to the body as he begins to try to ward Ortiz off.
Wilder's fighting. He has a bad arm.
Was fighting at the time.
The arm injury is going to hold him out for a little while now too. So now when he come back, he'll have to overcome some ring
the rust, and he's not used to it because he's a very active fighter.
Exactly. Yeah, on the attack from that southpaw stance, countered that left with a 1-2. Countered the straight right with the 1-2. Beautiful left hand that landed, grazed the chin. Not really hard, but it did land.
4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's 5 o'clock now on the East Coast. Is the best thing so far because we've seen it even in the NFL in primetime games. One of the more eyeballs watch something like this, the less inclined they are to watch more boxing.
Yeah, well, let me just say one thing to that, Max. Do not make the mistake of missing the big fight coming up next weekend. So it's got to be real good, and it's the two best in the weight division fighting one another. Do not sleep on that because of this.
Lloyd, not only that, but then the following week, Lomachenko and Walter.
Yes, sir. So we got 2 weeks of extraordinary boxing coming up, so don't take it this way.
Unfortunately, it's not 3 weeks of extraordinary boxing.
It may be. All depends on how well Molina comes. Yeah, do not sleep on that fight because of the lack of effort here. And now we see Malik looking like he's getting a little more confidence. Maybe his confidence is coming.
The only thing that, it doesn't save this, but it may be the thing that people take away, is if Ortiz is able to score a memorable, devastating one-punch knockout. Something that you remember, the way Golovkin, or the way he lifted Martin Murray off his feet before he dropped him. If Ortiz could score a kind of highlight, aesthetically pleasing one-punch KO here, maybe that's what people would remember, because otherwise this is desultory.
This has been scratch and sniff, as Malik Scott has mostly tried to stay away and has part of the time succeeded in doing so. And if we're looking, he's not going to get it searching with the left hand the way he is. That's what Scott is looking for. The way to get it is with the right hook. But I don't think he's going to get it because Scott is looking for the left hand all the way.
And that's exactly what King Kong is looking for, the left hand. So it's going to be very difficult. Throw one light one just like that to set up the hard one at the end of it. Don't try to get him with one shot. Malik does have a lot of fights and a lot of experience.
He did set up the right hook in that sequence, just didn't land it hard enough. On the other hand, Malik Scott is still not fighting in such a way as to attempt to win the fight. Let's check in with Harold Letterman, our unofficial scorer, and see how it stands after 6.
Well, Jim, I've got it a shutout for sure. Jim, Luis Ortiz is not really throwing a hard right hook in this fight. He's not the mostly left hands. A lot of times he throws a really wicked right hook, but in this fight, he's sticking the right hook out, the right hand out, he jabs with it.
Than it was against, say, Bryant Jennings?
Of course it is, because Malik Scott has much more amateur and professional experience.
To the fact that Scott is throwing 13 punches per round. In other words, not putting out enough to even give a semblance of trying to win the fight, but rather
is going to allow Ortiz to counter his punches and catch him with something that's liable to take him out of there.
One of the things I mentioned earlier in the night, and Roy, you brought up combination punching, how Ortiz isn't throwing his hands in combination enough, is that some of these young heavyweights are in stark contrast to a lot of the top Eastern European heavyweights that we've seen in recent years, who had very mechanical styles and threw a lot of 1s and 1-2s. Are more dynamic, they throw more combinations, more fluidly with power. But Ortiz is not doing that here. He's throwing 1s and 1-2s.
Yep. Not very smart, but here the thing goes. He threw some good straight right hands earlier in this round, so if Ortiz is going to catch him, now is his best time because really Malik is trying to catch him right now.
The thing about Malik is even if he were to somehow...
Well, they want to see could he knock anybody else out in the division, so I'm quite sure they would.
And favoring in many of the earlier rounds.
Good hook by Malik Scott.
Good counter punching now by Malik Scott, who has gotten much more aggressive the last couple of rounds. Malik Scott in the pink and black trunks. Harold Letterman's unofficial scorecard at the bottom of your screen shows you that he sees Luis Ortiz winning every round.
Scott's not giving him a lot of opportunity, but again, he needs to figure out a way to land some flush shots even when the other guy is trying to survive.
You say if he knocked him out, will we want to see him again? Well, you know, it's like you got to remember the Doug Flutie effect. Doug Flutie threw that Hail Mary. Anytime we know Doug Flutie may throw a Hail Mary, he had the bomb. He had the opportunity, or he had the capabilities of throwing that bomb.
Yeah, and I don't think it would,
No, it
and
wouldn't.
even in a competitive sense, maybe, but in a marketing sense, I don't think it would. I don't think that there would be some...
Michael Bent, former American Olympic heavyweight who landed fighting Lennox Lewis in a big pay-per-view. And to this day, you cannot look at Michael Bent without remembering bouncing off the ropes in Tulsa and knocking Tommy Morrison out with one right hand.
It becomes immediately unforgettable.
Yeah, there are things, though, that Malik Scott's done here. Not only run and tried to survive, but when he's been caught, claim it's a rabbit punch when the replay shows that it clearly wasn't. Does the kind of things that turn fans off.
He did also the kind of thing that turns fans on is that he did take the fight against this guy who nobody wants to fight. I mean, if he would take the fight...
After we suggested the very strong probability of a first-round knockout, if he cannot, in fact, get Scott out of there at some point.
And it also gives other top heavyweights an excuse to continue to avoid him. Oh, look at him. He couldn't stop Malik Scott. He was boring. People weren't excited by the last fight. A lot of it's matchmaking, as Roy pointed out earlier. You got to put...
First ever trip to round 9 for Luis Ortiz. He's never been past the 8th round before in his professional career.
Oh, good body shot.
Great body shot.
That may set up the overhand right now. Come in overhand left. And that was just a good left hook by Malik Scott, though.
Yep, that's a very fair criticism, Jim. As you know, obviously it's easy to be highly critical of Malik Scott in this fight. Putting his punches together better, as Roy mentioned, keeping Malik Scott's hands busy, his feet still.
Too much head hunting, too much searching with the left hand, and still, he has completely dominated the fight. He's won every round. He's scored 3 official knockdowns of Scott. There could have been more. So it's not exactly, it was not 11 months. He did fight Tony Thompson in March. So it has been an 8-month layoff for Scott as the result of the, Scott's the one with the 11-month layoff coming in.
Scott's showing also a lot of ring savvy and a lot of survival skills because he's surviving, but now he's also taking a chance or two here and there.
That one of these counter shots puts Ortiz down and places the whole thing in a slightly different shade as the public sizes it up.
Here's the question. All things considered, I know the stakes are much lower here. Worst fight, this or Klitschko Fury?
Klitschko Fury by far.
By far, I totally agree. And we get to the 10th of schedule 12. Harold, how do you have it through 9?
Okay, so I got a 9-0, 90-78. Jim, I want to see him again.
Yeah, Ortiz, we want to see again.
Oh, good body shot again by Ortiz.
Ortiz showing you that counter-punching skill. And there's a well-placed right hand to the body.
Going back to the heavyweight division, I'm not suggesting that Joseph Parker is a heavyweight puncher from New Zealand. I'm not suggesting that he's necessarily on Anthony Joshua or Luis Ortiz's level. Time will tell. But Ortiz is more of a George Foreman heavyweight kind of puncher, Roy, where he plods a little bit more and as many of them as quickly in as aggressive a stance.
Yeah, and what it is too, Max, is like we said, you know, these guys who was on the same level, or right, almost at the same level, and came to win a fight. They're not used to seeing guys who go out there and survive, because it's just not something that they're brought up being accustomed to.
So increasingly, it looks as though Malik Scott might be able to go the distance, but the Klitschkos have suffered through this. Various other big heavyweight punchers have suffered through this. Even George Foreman, in his second career, did not win every single fight by knockout.
Even with Mike Tyson, there was a run where surviving heavyweights, Bone Crusher Smith and others, would tie Tyson up.
So Max, do moments like this, moments like the Tyson distance fights that we just listed, moments like Tommy Morrison outboxing George Foreman,
or the neighboring divisions, because they've ducked him. I think what it does point out is nobody's perfect, and stop him, or a Tony Tucker, as you mentioned, or some others. It's just that he didn't always knock everyone out, not even Tyson in his prime.
And even while we're showing you the uneven portions of Ortiz's performance today against Malik Scott, it should be pointed out that by CompuBox counts, at a 50% clip, that's normally enough for a power puncher to be assured of winning the fight, and he's quite assured of winning this one if it goes to the finish line. Tall, 241-pound fighter who is clearly fighting just to survive.
Yeah, he's just trying to survive, but you want to try to pick a good opponent, because you want to leave a good taste in these people's mouths. You have to be very careful with picking a guy like Scott, who's just going to come.
Get this out of my head. I have to go home and watch, you know, like Holyfield Bowl 1 or something like that. I need to somehow counteract this experience.
November 13, 1992. Eight seconds to go in round number 11. And we're very close here to moving on into the last round of the fight.
Someone we never thought we'd see.
Russ Amber, a professional cheerleader in the corner of Malik Scott, trying to get Scott to do what he hasn't done throughout his entire career. 3 minutes. Come on.
One of the best friends I have in boxing, but I don't know if he's quite that good. Come on, Jim, are you serious?
That's at least the 7th time that Malik Scott has been on the canvas. 3 of them were called knockdowns.
I think Malik Scott heard that.
So he's saying that Amber's not telling the truth?
No, he's just not hearing the truth.
Ah, gotcha.
Whether Amber's telling it or not.
But the fault is a little bit on Ortiz. You know, he's saying fight, fight. And it reminds me a little bit of, you know, after Mayweather and Pacquiao complained that Floyd didn't want to fight. Well, going into the fight, you know that your opponent has a defensive posture a lot of the time. You have to have a plan, please.
Remember when I fought Eric Harding, and I knew that he wasn't going to fight and not going to be that aggressive? I immediately went to beating the shoulder, because I knew that I probably would never take that as hard a puncher as Ortiz is. Had he attacked the shoulders right away.
At the end of Ali's career, a strategy where you hit him in the bicep so Ali couldn't have that late cover up against him, because he's a big puncher. Hit him in the bicep so that they couldn't lift their arms after a while, then knock him out later.
Either do like Golovkin did, walk through it, or either outsmart him, find another spot.
On the resume of a knockout puncher, and that never enhances the reputation of the knockout puncher.
Well, it ain't over yet.
It is now.
Oh, there it is.
Stanley Christodoulou scores the bout 120 to 106, and Nelson Vasquez scores the bout 119 to 106. All 3 in favor of the winner, and still undefeated, Luis King Kong